Danse, and welcome to wâhkôhtowin's virtual Remembrance Day Assembly. My name is Mr. Chief, and I am the principal here at wâhkôhtowin School. And so at this time, I would like to ask everyone to please all rise for the playing of O Canada. As well, remain standing for our drum song, our Treaty 6 song, and our victory songs.
Kaganata Kigenogeta skino Sagitue Kitawa sumisa Kite hinago pagoteo Kichigi wete no Misuete gaganata gagana wete no Kutawino gaganwe chigeo Gaganata gagana wete no Gaganata gagana
Hai, dan satu kakun wagumagantig. I just wanted to say thank you for allowing me to come here today, and I'm going to share with you about the Treaty 6 song, the Victory song, and the drum song, and their significance. First of all, the Treaty 6 song was developed by Red Bull, and they made this song so that it would honor the Queen and the flag that flies over our country. So when they sing that song, they're saying that may the flag fly over our country forever. And it says that the Queen gave us this flag so that, to help protect us. So that's the significance of that song. The victory song is sung just shortly after the grand entry, and they put up the flags for the day. And so it'll be the Canadian flag, the American flag usually, and also the Eagle staff. And depending on what province you're from, like in ours, it would be Saskatchewan flag. And they would have danced those in, and during the victory song, we sing that song to honor all those flags that were danced in. The drum song itself is to honor the dancers that come into the dance area, all the people that come to the assembly, all the people who are gathered together. And they usually have the grass dancers come out and dance during that time and bless the grounds where the people are going to be dancing later. And the drum song is sung to honor the drum, to honor the dancers, to honor the dignitaries, and to honor the people. And it's like a prayer song. and it's blessing of the grounds is what it is. Thank you. Wâhkôhtowin, warmer relations.
There stands a soldier by Audrey Walters. There stands a soldier, tall, proud, and still, guarding and protecting the rights of all who will. All who will remember, all who live so free in this great country, Canada, for you and me.
Good morning, wâhkôhtowin. It's Mr. Chief here again. And this morning I'm going to briefly talk about a story that my father had told me in regards to my grandfather. So my grandfather his name was wâhkôhtowin, which means bear in Cree. His given name, or his English name, was Albert, and Albert Belly. And so Albert Belly was a World War II veteran. And so one of the stories that that was told to me, it's not really much of it's not a long story, as my dad tells me that my grandfather never really talked about the war. It was one of those times, I guess, that he just didn't really want to remember too much about it. However, one of the things that he does remember that he had told my father, and also my father telling me, is that the day he landed in Dieppe. And so he remembers, he talks about how when he had left the reserve and left to go to Winnipeg, and from Winnipeg boarded a train all the way to the East Coast, and then remembers being in Montreal. And then you got to remember, this was a time when not a whole lot of our First Nations people actually left the reserve. So for him, this was very new. And so he got into to somewhere on the East Coast, like I said, and boarded a huge ship, a huge vessel. And my dad says, I think the vessel was called Queen Mary. And so here was he was on this ship. And what he remembers is that as they were crossing the Atlantic Ocean, as he looked to his left and right, there were other ships as well, other large ships. And here it was the Canadian military going off to war. And so as you know, as they were on this ship, he remembers at times as the planes were flying over by. And so the planes were flying over by, and then afterwards he was talking about that they were keeping close eye on the ships, on the soldiers, as they were getting closer to Europe. And then so he remembers getting on shore now. This is the day they embarked in the beaches in Dieppe. And he says all he remembers was my dad telling me is that his comrades and his people around him falling, and it was very chaotic. And so, and nothing much more than that, other than that he had traveled throughout Europe, not traveled, but was in Europe. And then they had, were different areas of where they actually were in combat, but doesn't talk about that really. There's not a lot of stories about him talking about fighting, but that was only one of the few stories that my dad had remembered. And there were some stories that my dad says that he would only talk about in certain times, but they weren't very good stories. Like, it wasn't really, as you probably will be told by your teachers, that the war wasn't good. And so this was why my grandfather never told of stories, and he really wanted to just he just basically wanted to keep those stories to himself, I guess. And so, but he only told a story of how he left and how when he got to Dieppe. And so, but yeah, there was a lot of so similar stories like that came from other relatives of mine that were in the war, World War I, and also Korean War. I've had a couple of grandfathers who were in that, and also a first cousin who also was in the Afghanistan. And so a lot of them do have their stories, but a lot of them just basically don't really talk too much about the times they went into battle. So that's my story. That's a personal story that was told to me, like I said, by my dad, and who I don't remember my grandfather telling me that story, but I guess he had. My dad was telling me that he used to tell that story to him and to us. So anyhow, thank you for listening, and Yogi Sigansig.
Good morning, this is Mrs. Bear coming to you from my home on a snowy Saturday morning. I'm doing a song for Remembrance Day. I used to do this song when we used to do our assemblies, and I did this one for a Remembrance Day service that we had last year, but things are so different this year. But it still remains the same, that I'm doing a tribute for the veterans and all the people that have sacrificed so much and given their lives so that we can experience the freedoms that we have here in Canada. One freedom for sure is education, that we can go to school and we live in a peaceful country. So this is a tribute for the veterans. Spend all your time waiting for that second chance, for a break that would make it okay. There's always some reason to feel not listening. Have a great day.
Good morning. Tansa Toya. Happy Remembrance Day. Umumanos kawi ay muktaman. Kayas, kaginuod ng getsik. Kitay sini mak. Aya, ano tsawi ng musyan, egweste, yawi at tutaman, dancing peace by. Today I'd like to thank you all once again for allowing me to be here and thank the Creator for allowing me to be part of this Cultural Corner segment and Remembrance Day. Today, we are here to remember those who fought in the war. My grandfather, his name was Ed Thunderchild, was in the war. And he told me many, many stories of his journey there. And he also came back with a few songs. He told me one time there was this warrior, they call him wâhkôhtowin. That's how you say warrior in Cree, is wâhkôhtowin. Anyway, this one warrior went to war. And when he went to war, he had to leave his wife, his girlfriend. They parted and she got on a bus, and as she was going away, she was crying. And so it was very difficult for him. So we went overseas, they fought together. And when they were fighting, he got killed in that war, that man, and left his wife behind. But before he left, he had made a song for his girlfriend. And he had told his friend, if I ever die, he told his friends that if he dies in this war, can you take this song back to my girlfriend? And so when the war was over and they all came back, he brought that song. They did this ceremony and they brought that girl into the center and they sang this song. And it sounds like this. There she goes, riding away, crying as she leaves. Oh, my sweetheart, you sure leave me sad and blue. Hey, Mama tu ni chemos awiya ni pigis katas kati hey hey hey
hey yo, hey yo, hey yo, oh, hey yo, there she goes riding away, crying as she leaves. Oh, my sweetheart, you sure leave me sad and blue. Hey yo, woo. Thank you.
Good morning, and welcome to How's It Going with Mr. Hohen. Today, we have a special guest, Captain Joel Posberg of the Royal Canadian Air Force, joining us for a Remembrance Day presentation. Please enjoy.
My name is Captain Joel Posberg, and I'm a helicopter pilot in the Royal Canadian Air Force. I was asked by Mr. Hohen to answer a couple questions from students, so that's what I am going to do here. Before I get started, I think I'll tell you guys a little bit about myself. As I said, my name is Joel Posberg. I come from small town Saskatchewan, in particular a town called Lanigan. It's about an hour drive to the east of Saskatoon. And I grew up going to school with Mr. Hohen, so that's what the connection there is. I am currently 27 years old. I turned 28 pretty soon here. And I've been in the Air Force for 5 years now. The helicopter that I fly is called the CH-146 Griffin. It's very similar to some civilian helicopters that are out there, but the military took it and made it its own. So we added a couple things onto it. In general, the things we do with it are moving troops around. You can mount guns on the side of it and shoot from it. And basically for the Army to have an eye in the sky is a valuable thing. So we spend a lot of time supporting the Army and what they do. Even though we are part of the Air Force, we work quite a bit with the Canadian Army, and we pride ourselves on that. So the first question I got was, why did I join the Air Force? Short answer, it's something that I always wanted to do, you know. Growing up, most kids watch Star Wars. Most of us watch Luke Skywalker swoop in to save the day, blowing up the Death Star. I thought that would be super cool to do, but soon came to realize that flying an X-Wing isn't something you can do in the real world. Then when I was in high school, I saw a documentary. It was about the training of our Royal Canadian Air Force fighter pilots in Cold Lake. And it was like, wow, that's sort of like an X-Wing, more realistic, and it looks like something that I could potentially do. I was really surprised that it was in Cold Lake, Alberta, which is pretty close to where I'm from in Saskatchewan, and I thought that it would be awesome. And from that point forward, there really wasn't any question. Like, I was super interested in becoming a pilot, and every decision I made from that point forward was geared towards me ending up in a Canadian Armed Forces aircraft. Another question I have is what the training was like. It was pretty long, so from getting these wings here on my chest, which is the qualifying badge of the pilot, from when I joined. It's probably a period of about 3 years is how long it took. I mentioned that I wanted to be a jet pilot, but I am currently sitting in the cockpit of a helicopter. So the training process, you go to boot camp, you go to Army things, you learn how to be a soldier. After that, you get sent how to fly an airplane. So an airplane is not a helicopter. The way it works is you kind of get weeded out. Like, they can tell right away if you have the skill to be a pilot or not. Lots of people fall off along the way. I feel very fortunate that I didn't. So there's this first phase on a dinky little propeller plane. There's a second phase on a bigger, beefier plane, very analogous in size and power to something they would have flown in World War II. And after that phase, in this bigger, more powerful airplane, they decide for you what you are going to fly. So you do have your say. They give you a chance to say like where you would want to live, what you would want to fly, type of thing. Ultimately, it's out of your hands. It's kind of what the Air Force needs at the time. When I went through, they either decided I wasn't good enough to be a jet pilot, or they just had more spots for helicopter pilots at that time. So I got selected to be a helicopter pilot instead of a jet pilot. Another question I got was what kind of jobs there are in the Air Force, and there is like everything you can think of. The Air Force is a huge organization. Obviously the most visible one is probably being a pilot flying the aircraft, but there's everything in between us flying it and getting off the ground. So there's mechanics and stuff like that. And then even in the greater Air Force, we have cooks, we have doctors, we have medics. As I said, we have mechanics, and then there's the people that fly in the aircraft here also. So another question is what's your favorite thing about the job? I love flying, so I feel very fortunate that I get to do something that not everyone gets to do. It was a lot of work to get here, and it's been paying off quite a bit lately. I love to fly, watch the trees rush by, and then sharing that experience with other people is something that's awesome too. In the back we have some seats there. One of our core mandates is to support the Canadian Army in what they do, lifting troops to and from. And probably the best part of the job is sharing flight with people who don't often get to fly. So you get a couple Army dudes in the back there, and they usually have a better day than they would have otherwise, you know? I'll talk a little bit now about how the helicopter flies, because the controls in a helicopter are a little bit different than the controls of a car, which I'm pretty sure everyone has driven in before. So there's 3 main controls of a helicopter. The one in the middle here, the one off to the side, and then there's those pedals on the floor there. The stick in the middle here, it's called the cyclic. And if you can imagine like the rotor going around outside, the cyclic sort of tips the disc. What that means is like the disc will move forward, left, right, side to side, and as a result of that, the helicopter moves like that. Basically, that's our main form of steering. Off to the side here, this one is called the collective. By pulling up or down on that, pushing down, that moves the helicopter up or down. I remember in training they called this one the uppy downy stick, because you pull up on it to go up. And then finally on the floor there's a set of pedals. And the pedals are a little bit different than the pedals in your car. The pedals control the tail rotor. And by pushing on the pedals, if you push left, the helicopter will turn to the left, and if you push right, the helicopter will turn to the right. You might have noticed that there's quite a bit of gauges in the front. As I mentioned, there's 2 pilots, so lots of the gauges are actually the same. So it might be a little less complicated than you were initially imagining. I'll just talk about the basic ones, the ones we look at most here. So there's a basic T here. These are arguably the most important ones. In the bottom one, you got a compass here. Top left, that is an airspeed indicator. It reads in nautical miles an hour. This one is called an attitude indicator. Basically, like if you were to fly into cloud out there, this would allow you to know where the horizon is so you don't get turned upside down or whatever when you're going through the goo in the clouds. And this last one here is an altimeter, and it allows you to know just how high above ground you are. Just provide you guys with a quick look at what we wear while we're flying. This here is my helmet here. Pretty standard helicopter pilot helmet, I think, here. And this is a vest that I fly in. You can put armored plates in it so it becomes bulletproof. And there's numerous like utility pouches here. So if you're carrying a gun like in the holster here, that's where you'd put ammunition. In the side here, right now it's full of survival gear. So if you go down in the woods, then you have some stuff that you can survive with. And that's a first aid kit in the middle in case you get shot or whatever in flight. Another question that I got was what Remembrance Day means to me. So Remembrance Day is actually my birthday. It was really nice growing up, and for the most part having every one of my birthdays off, because it's like a national holiday type of thing. Other than that, nowadays, now I'm wearing this uniform here, and it's something that the Canadian Armed Forces takes a bit more seriously, honoring those who came before us, those who gave their lives in the name of Queen and country throughout the ages. And that's something I think about, you know? Because when I joined because I wanted to fly fast and high in a jet, and it was on my own free will. There wasn't much of a compelling reason beyond that. Like, there are big threats in the world. There wasn't anything that I felt I need to join up so that I can go fight that. I joined more or less to have a good time, you know? But these people who came before me 100 years ago, they didn't have as much of a choice. And now that I'm here wearing this uniform, that's something that I think about. These people were under a lot more pressure to join. There was a real threat in the world that they had to address. And I feel very thankful that these people came before me to fight the good fight for Canada before me. So that's pretty much all I have to say. No more questions or anything like that, but I do have lots of cool videos to share. So for the next couple minutes or whatever, I'll just share some of the photos that I've taken over the past 2 years that I've been flying these green helicopters.
Good morning, Saimina. Pero gumaganti. We're going to talk a little bit today about the Veterans Day and the veterans, how we do things in our culture, in the Cree culture. In our culture, we honor our veterans throughout the year at every powwow. We don't just honor our veterans on the one day of the year. Every time we have a powwow, we get the veterans to line up in the grand entry, and they carry in the Eagle staff, the Canadian flag, the American flag, and the provincial flag. In our case, it would be Saskatchewan. And those veterans would all get together, and we'd honor them in the grand entry as they bring in the flags. In our language, we call our warriors wâhkôhtowin, and we call our women warriors wâhkôhtowin. There are other names for it, like wâhkôhtowin means a fighter or a soldier. And then we also have wâhkôhtowin, meaning acts like a man. These are the different terms we use in our culture to talk about our veterans. But Veterans Day for us is a very special day as well. And during that time, we sing songs and we honor our veterans. And the reason why we do that in our culture so much is because, when our veterans went to war, oftentimes they had to give up their treaty status as an Indian, and they would have to sign a paper, and they wouldn't be status anymore when they came back from the war. Many of the war veterans were given land when they got back, but the Aboriginals or First Nations weren't given that honor. And so, we continue to honor them in our own way. So, that's all I got to say about that. Thank you very much, all my relations. Hi.
We need to remember, we need to hold on to all of those memories of those who are gone, lest we forget the role of honor and what they sacrificed in the end. So remember the scarlet flower, the little red poppy that never died on the battlefields, like the memories of all our countrymen. We wear them close to our hearts, like the little red poppy. We need to remember, we need to hold on. It's our salute to the cause for freedom, and that we must belong, lest we forget a moment of silence and turn our backs on time. So remember the scarlet flower, the little red poppy that never died on the battlefields, like the memories of all our countrymen. We wear them close to our hearts, like the little red poppy. We wear them close to our hearts, like the little red poppy. We need to remember. We need to hold on.
Well, that concludes our virtual Remembrance Day service. And so I would like just to take this time to remember all of the brave men and women who served our country and in those times of conflict throughout the world. And also for personally myself, I just like to also acknowledge and take the time to pay my respects to all of those First Nations veterans that fought for our country and came home to something that they were not expecting. And so these are some of the stories that our First Nations veterans talk about. They talk about the times when they had gone off to war to fight for this country, and then coming home and still not be recognized as a Canadian citizen until much later. And so those are the men that I also want to take this time to remember. And so with that, I thank you again for joining us in our Remembrance Day virtual service. Hai hai.